So Jack has plunged an unknown substance into his veins and has had his genetic code rewritten by this mysterious red substance. He has taken a shortcut into acquiring some of the magician's powers by injecting the rubedo straight into his system. Alchemy is now at work in the game's narrative. The game now shifts to a small but significant cutscene whereby the splicer says,
"This little fish looks like he just had his cherry popped."
Well, that's the name of the gamer's interpretation. What can we make of this? An at first innocuous line, but if we think about it further, its meaning is quite evident. First, to have your cherry popped is an obvious reference to the feminine. Jack has metaphorically lost his virginity. His body has physically and permanently changed as an inevitable result of the injection of the plasmid substance, or in other words, his Eve has been integrated into the body. The reference to little fish is also significant. In the Bible, early Christians adopted the Greek for fish in order to refer to Jesus Christ, Son of God. Next, those who were baptized into Christ refer to themselves as fish born into water. An obvious parallel with the splicer's statement. Jack is spiritually being reborn. Last, Greeks, Romans and pagans used the fish symbol before early Christians did. So, in fear of persecution, Christians used to mark secret meeting places and tombs with a fish and greet each other by drawing a fish with their hands in order to symbolize their allegiance. Next, as Jack is writhing in pain and recovering from his rebirth, a small girl approaches and whilst in his semi-dazed state, she remarks,
"Look, Mr. Bubbles, it's an angel. I can see light coming from his belly. Wait a minute. He's still breathing. It's alright. I know he'll be an angel soon."
To quickly unravel this, we have Jack referred to as an angel. In other words, if we stick with, let's say, a Abrahamic interpretation, he is a being who dwells between men and God and acts as their protectors. It is interesting to note that the girl, however, alludes to the fact that Jack will soon be dead, i.e., he will be an angel, which signifies that in the world of Bioshock, angels will not survive here in this hellish realm, and that it is only in man's created technology that she is protected by the famous Big Daddies. A technocratic vision, perhaps, or an allegory to man replacing God. We should have noticed that the first plasmid that Jack takes is powered by Eve, or in other words, the feminine. Remember what I said previously about the tarot? To recap, the second card, the Magician, is the first progression after starting as the Fool. The next card after the Magician is the Priestess, which obviously is female. The Priestess represents, unlike the Magician, who is purely a masculine archetype, the synthesis of the feminine. By integrating the male qualities of the Magician with the Priestess, we get the whole completion of the second stage. That is to say, the adept has become a whole and complete person, not by becoming the magician and mastering the elements through the male psyche, but by mastering both male and female attributes. In simple terms, it is necessary to integrate both the male and feminine qualities of both cards in order to continue the progression towards a perfected being. Jack started as the Fool in the plane, became the Magician by injecting the plasmid, but has also imbibed the feminine through the Eve in the plasmid. The reference to Adam and Eve here is obvious. In the Bible, man's fall into imperfection began when the male and female were separated, and this ultimately led to mankind being removed from paradise. It is the job of the adept to reintegrate his Adam and Eve back into himself if he is to attain the perfection and sanctity of reliving in God's perfected domain. This is represented therefore by the second and third cards of the tarot, and also in the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, in which again the male and female needs to be integrated and perfected. In the symbology of the Priestess, we can see too the twin black and white columns of Jachin and Boaz, which represent this integration of opposites. We also see the Kabbalistic Tree of Life and the Torah embedded in the scroll. Remember in episode 1 I mentioned balance in relation to order and chaos, and so too we find this in the sun and the moon, Apollo and Isis, the Apollonian and Dionysian dialectics, and further we will see this represented in Freemasonry. As this is the second mention of Masonry in this essay series, we should probably understand some of the principles behind it. I will do this as succinctly as possible for now, as no doubt we will be referencing back to Masonry time and time again. First, we have the square and compass in the lighthouse. Well, let's consider these as two separate tools. The compass is designed to create the perfect circle, and the set square, well, quite obviously, to create the perfect square. When we combine the two, we have the circle in the square, and the square itself will produce a perfect circle. The square is the symbol of that which is earthly or material, in other words, man's physical body, and the circle represents the soul. What we have here then is the two principal aspects of man as body and spirit, represented by these two perfected shapes. The initiate or apprentice on entering Freemasonry must study and perfect these two aspects. Now, I have to admit that I have intentionally oversimplified this process, but suffice to say, again we have a duality in which two parts must be perfected. Later in the Masonic journey, this symbol is revisited and reinterpreted. In the Fellowcraft degree, this same symbol refers to rising above the material world into spirit, and later in the Master's degree, the divine is finally liberated from the material, as the heart and mind are from mortality. In the words of Manly P. Hall, 2nd degree Freemason, the divine is liberated from its cube, heart and mind are liberated from the symbol of mortality, and as emotion and thought they unite for the glorification of the greatest and highest. Then the sun and moon are united, and the Hermetic degree is consummated. Do you remember in episode 1 what I mentioned about the sun and moon being out of balance as Jack hits the water? Again, we have the necessity for rebalance, as, just to remind you, the moon lights the world, but the sun god, Apollo, is ablaze and close to drowning. Next, the Masonic tracing board. I have to point out that whole essays or books can and have been written on this, but I will attempt a simplification as best as I can. I mentioned in episode 1 that the purpose of this series was to highlight esoteric symbols in the game. My purpose in doing so was to show that there is more to the game than just it being a first-person shooter. This is because beyond the conscious narratives we ingest during the game, there are symbols that tell stories that we might not be immediately aware of. I have argued that part of this narrative is the initiate's journey. Jack, as I have mentioned numerous times, is on a spiritual journey to reach a perfection that he may not have reached otherwise. If he hadn't taken the plane and gone about his business, he wouldn't have become the man he is at the finale of the game. At the end, he is the hero or perfected being who has brought forth the sun and rekindled the light of the world. So the Masonic tracing board is significant because its purpose is to illustrate important teachings to the initiate, and only the initiate, through these symbols. These symbols we can all see quite clearly, but only their true meanings can be understood by the adept. If we look at the tracing board with uninitiated eyes, we can see the sun, the moon, a ladder, a checkered floor, and so on. The average man will probably conclude that the picture is an interesting one, a strange piece of art perhaps, or even something from a dreamscape. Like the tarot cards we have begun to interpret, there are however a lot of messages hidden in this particular image. Remember the Fool, how we saw the white dog representing intuition, or the magician with the 4 elements on the table? Even the colours I highlighted in the parcel, and the red rose representing Rosicrucianism, we have started to understand in rather differing ways. And so it is with this tracing board. So now to the fun stuff. What are the occult meanings hidden in plain sight here? Well, for that you'll have to tune in for episode 5, as for now I urge you to meditate on everything that I have elucidated, and perhaps even begin your own journey of discovery as we continue to explore this fascinating sojourn through Jack's spiritual awakening. Thanks for watching. Episode 5 coming soon.